All right, so we're gonna do worksheet now 8B. And we basically have this picture of a particle moving in a horizontal direction. And we want to find position, which we're being given, velocity, which is the first derivative, and acceleration, which is the second derivative or the derivative of velocity at t equals 3 seconds. So the first thing I want to do is I want to do I'm just going to plug in 3 for t, and that gives me 3 cosine of 4/3 pi times 3 plus 4 sine of 3/4 pi times 3. And this is meters because we're talking about distance or position, same. This is going to equal 3. And this 3 cancels with this 3. So that's going to give me the cosine of 4 pi. And the cosine of 4 pi is coterminal with 0. So this is 0, 2 pi, 4 pi, 6 pi, etc. Negative 2 pi, right? Like it doesn't matter. As long as we go around one full cycle, we get there. My point here is 1, 0, which makes cosine 1, sine 0. Cosine is what I'm looking for. I have the cosine of 4 pi, which is cosine of 4 pi is 1 because that's the same as cosine of 0. So this becomes 3 plus 4 times the sine of 9 pi over 4. And the way to find the coterminal angle, because we know this is more than one time around the circle, I'm going to change this to a mixed number, which is 2 1/4 pi. If you don't know how to do that, you just divide 9 by 4. You get 2, you subtract 8, and you get 1 left over, which gives you the 1/4 pi. And then, so now it's 2 1/4 pi, but that's the sine of 2 1/4 pi. We subtract 2 pi, we get the sine of pi over 4. Here, I'll write it here. 4 times the sine of pi over 4, which is coterminal with 2 1/4. This gives me 3 plus 4 times the square root of 2 over 2, which is equal to 3 plus 2 times the square root of 2 meters. So that's my position. Then I want to take the derivative of x of t. So x prime of t is going to equal, and we have 3 times, derivative of cosine is negative sine of 4/3 pi t times, basically we're doing the derivative of this, which gives me 4/3 pi. And okay, so that's the derivative of the cosine plus 4. Derivative of sine is cosine of 3/4 pi t times the derivative of this, which is 3/4 pi. And so now we just need to plug in t equals 3. So we have negative 3 times the sine of, and if I plug in 3 here, this 3 here, if I plug in 3 here, this 3 is going to cancel with this 3, and I'm going to be left with 4 pi times 4/3 pi plus 4. And then we have the cosine of, if we plug in 3 for t, we get 9 pi over 4 times 3/4 pi. Okay, and I think I got rid of all my t's. I did. I have -3. Well, the sine of 4 pi, as we saw here, the sine is 0. It's really times 0 times 4/3 pi, which I don't really care about because this is 0. Then I have plus, and I'm gonna multiply this 4. I'm gonna move that 3/4 pi at the end to the front. And I have the cosine of 9 pi over 4, which we said was the same as the cosine of pi over 4. This becomes, cancel this with this, I have 3 pi times the cosine of pi over 4, which is equal to 3 pi times square root of 2 over 2, which is equal to 3 times square root of 2 over 2 pi. And that is the velocity. So that's going to be in meters per second. I think t was in seconds. Yes. This is my velocity. And then if I want my acceleration, I have to take the derivative of the derivative. I'm just going to write x prime of t, but instead of that, I can write this as v of t, which is my velocity. And then I'm just going to clean this up because it's like you do not want to take the derivative of that this line here until you clean it with algebra. 3 times 4/3 pi. So that's coming from here and from here. Then I have times, and then I'm going to pull this negative out, and I get the sine of 4/3 pi t. And I think that's all good. Plus 4. And again, I'm going to do the same thing, that 4/3 pi at the end. I'm going to push forward, and I get the cosine of 3/4 pi t. This cancels with this. I get -4 pi times the sine of 4/3 pi t, plus this cancels with this, 3 pi times the cosine of 3/4 pi t. And guess what? Now we have our first derivative, or our velocity function, in a little better state than it was in. And we're going to find our derivative of our velocity, which is our acceleration. And again, we start by saying, first we have a constant. That -4 pi is a constant. The derivative of the sine is the cosine of 4/3 pi t. But we have to multiply by that part there. Plus, I think I'm going to write it underneath here. I hope that's okay with y'all. 3 pi. The derivative of the cosine is the negative sine of 3/4 pi t times 3/4 pi. All right, that is my acceleration equation, not very well, not very simplified, but at least we have something, right? We can simplify it a little bit. I'm going to take this part from the back and multiply it to the front. So I have negative 16/3 pi squared times the cosine of 4/3 pi t minus 9 pi squared over 9 pi squared over 4 times the sine of 3/4 pi t. We want to say the acceleration at time t equals 3 is equal to negative 16/3 pi squared times the cosine of, I'm going to put a 3 in here. That's going to cancel with my 3, so I get 4 pi minus 9/4 pi squared times the sine of, and I'm going to put a 3 in here, and that gives me 9/4 pi. All right, well, we've already figured out what those sines and cosines are before. So this is minus 16/3 pi squared. Cosine of 4 pi is the same as cosine of 0, which is 1. So it kind of just disappears. Minus 9/4 pi squared. And again, we've done this before. This is the same as the sine of pi over 4, which is the square root of 2 over 2. So we get negative 16/3. Actually, I'm going to write it like this, just to make it a little prettier. I'm going to factor out that pi squared. And then I'm going to, actually, I'll factor out negative pi squared. And then I just get 16/3 minus 9 times the square root of 2 over 2. And that is meters per second squared. So I get this to be negative 3.74 pi squared and times squared equals 36.9 meters per second squared. Actually, that's negative. So what does a negative acceleration mean? Negative acceleration means that what I'm doing is slowing down. If I'm driving and I put my foot on the brake, I'm accelerating in the negative direction. I'm slowing the car down.